Consumer protection in relation to personal finance. By the end of this video, you should be able to identify the function and the role of the different forms of consumer protection of personal finance. Let's start with the first and the most common level of protection that you'll see. It's something called the Financial Conduct Authority, or the FCA. Now, the FCA aims to make sure that financial markets work well so consumers get a fair deal. Within that, the FCA will ensure that organisations have customers at heart and they only offer, and the key word here is appropriate, products and services. So every financial institution has to make sure that when they're offering you a service, it's appropriate for your needs as a customer. And that's why you tend to have to fill in forms, and they'll be checking against what you fill in to see that it's appropriate for your needs. And that could be your needs to the loan, for example, if you're having a loan or whatever purpose you're taking the money out for, and that you can afford the terms of it. If it's not appropriate for you, then they should not sell it, and that'd be classed as mis-selling. They also have to ensure that consumers are treated fairly, and they can stop organisations from breaching the rules in fairness linked to financial selling of products, and they can stop you trading and selling altogether. So again, they have to treat you fairly, and if you do breach those rules, they can stop you as an organisation. So if you can't trade because you're not FCA approved, then obviously you can't lend money and you can't make a profit. They also will ensure that the financial market is operating with integrity and honesty, and that's a whole market in general. So they try to ensure that every organisation is following set rules, they are showing that they are transparent, and they are honest in the way that they act and the way that they trade as an organisation. And the FCA will try to ensure this is the case. If not, then again, they breach those rules and can stop them trading. And they'll also try to help to promote competition within the market. And they will carry out any investigations if people got concerned about how a market is operating. So, for example, they would work with other authorities like the CMA to try and make sure that obviously the market is competitive, because of course a competitive market means the consumer benefits typically from lower rates of interest or lower bank charges, for example. And that's the role of the FCA. Most, if not all, of your large lending organisations are part of the FCA and have to follow their rules and regulations. Alongside that, you then have what's called the FOS, which is the Financial Ombudsman Service. Now, the FOS is an organisation who a customer can contact if they have a complaint against their bank, insurer or finance firm. So straight away you spot now that this is something that the customer can contact. Now, the FOS is established by the government, and it's a totally free service to use. Now, the FOS has to be the final port of call. You should already try to negotiate and solve your problem with the lender or the bank or the insurance firm you got the grievance with. The FOS are totally independent, so they will review all the information that you put forward in a complaint. They will consider both party sides, and then they will reach an agreement, or they'll offer advice on how it can be resolved. Typically, you find that most lenders or banks, insurance firms, for example, they will try to solve the problem before it gets sent to the ombudsman, because the ombudsman typically will favour the customer. You know, they're totally fair. If you've got a complaint and it's obviously a reasonable complaint, they're more likely to favour the customer as it's a reasonable complaint. The FOS does not write the rules or, for example, fine organisations who breach them. That is the job of the regulator. So that is the job of the FCA, for example. The FOS purely will make a decision based on the case that is put in front of it. Of course, it may pass its findings on if it believes that a certain organisation is obviously constantly breaching a certain regulation. You've also got the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, which is actually abbreviated the FSCS. Now, the FSCS is the one that you will see talked about on the news quite a lot. This is the one where people talk about if you put your money into a bank account, the £75,000 per person or per company is always protected and the government will pay out. That's actually the FSCS they're talking about. And it's effectively the UK's statutory fund of last resort. And that's a key word, statutory fund of last resort. In other words, it is the fallback, the last resort of funds. And it's for customers who've got financial services, and it covers more than just bank accounts. We always hear them talk about bank accounts, but it covers much more. For example, it covers investments, £50,000 per person or per firm. So effectively, it covers what you put into an investment. Also, home finance, so £50,000 per person per firm is covered again there. That's the limit. Of course, what that really means, which says per firm, is that you can put £50,000 in one company and you put £50,000 in another company, and that's covered. If you put it in the same company, though, it's not covered. Or you put it in the same company that's connected. So, for example, let's look at the obvious one with the banking one. The Royal Bank of Scotland obviously owns NatWest. So if you were to put £75,000 in NatWest and you put £75,000 in the Royal Bank of Scotland, you'd only be covered for £75,000 because it's the same company that owns both banks. Whereas if you put £75,000 in NatWest and £75,000 in Barclays, you'd be covered for both accounts because they're different firms. Now, the FSCS pay compensation if a bank or a firm is unlikely or unable to make them payments. So if they're in trouble financially, you should not lose your money, you should get it back. And it's a totally free service for the customer. And they are totally independent on the decisions that they'll reach. So you don't need to worry about that. And obviously that's trying to create some sort of security in the market, given the fears when banks are in danger of collapsing. And then you have the Office of Fair Trading. Now, the Office of Fair Trading, or the OFT, used to be an organisation in the UK that obviously was effectively responsible to protect the consumer's interests throughout everything that went on in the UK and any market. However, it was closed down in 2014, and its responsibilities have now been given to different organisations. So the FCA now regulates consumer credit, for example, obviously talked about before. And you've got the CMA, or the Competition and Markets Authority, which obviously effectively regulates the whole market practices in the whole of the UK. So they are looking for monopolies, mergers, and how it works. Of course, many of these rules and regulations are also set by the European Union, who've got their own authorities, which obviously overlook and oversee ours. How that will change in the future is obviously something that will be resolved with the European Union deciding, so the British deciding to leave the European Union. Of course, some people will argue that's better because it gives us more control of those sort of authorities. But we've got to try and implement that into our own regulation. And then lastly, you have the consumer credit legislation. Now, consumer credit legislation is quite far-reaching and quite extended. However, effectively, the Consumer Credit Act regulates credit and card purchases and any credit purchase effectively, but it gives you more protection if you enter into a loan or a hire agreement. It also gives you the right to a cooling off period. That means if you sign a contract, you get a set amount of time to consider whether that contract is correct for you, so you're not being pressure sold something. Typically, it's 14 days that you'll get to have a cooling off period. That is why they always advise that you never sign anything on the day. Distance selling gives you longer to obviously have a much more extended cooling off period. So the advice is never sign anything unless you want to do it, straight away on the day. Take your time, think about it, and send it back in the post. It gives you more rights. Of course, legislation related to consumer credit legislation tends to be you get your credit agreements at a distance, so they have to be what they have to follow regulations. They strict rules on this. You've got your set cooling off periods. You've got your credit withdrawal rights. So again, it tells you how you get out of your contract, for example. You've got your rights, your credit file, so what's been recorded in your credit file, be able to check your credit file so you can see your record. And then interestingly, the one that's probably most important to the consumer, shall we say, is actually one that people don't understand, and it's called Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act. And it's all about credit card purchases and additional rights. Effectively, if you buy it on a credit card, you are actually protected under Section 75. To cut the long story short, the simple approach is because your contract is with the credit card company and not with the person, obviously, the organisation you're buying the product from. So if the product was faulty and they failed to honour that, so you get back to the shop and they were refusing to honour it, well, actually, you can make a claim against the credit card company. And that's under Section 75, and that's because you've bought the item from them. It's up to them to then obviously pursue that claim against the retailer, for example. That's why some people actually quite like to buy large items on a credit card. It gives them more protection. Exactly the same if a company was to fall into administration or to liquidation. If you buy those items on a credit card, then you've got a greater level of protection because you're covered, effectively. Whereas somebody who pays cash could always have to join a list of effectively unsecured creditors who are waiting to get paid. And that's why consumer credit legislation is quite important and people forget all about it. Okay, that's it. You should now be able to identify the function and the role of the different forms of consumer protection of personal finance. I'd advise you do some further reading into that. The whole idea is to give you a quick overview. There is lots of detail about these different areas of law and legislation, but hopefully it's got you thinking about some of the more obvious ones and what they actually do in general from a basic point of view. Thanks for checking out the BeeBusinessBee YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the subscribe button down below to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. It's @BeeBusinessBee. Also, give the Facebook page a like. It's facebook.com/BeeBusinessBee. And lastly, don't forget to check out the online hive of activities found on BeeBusinessBee.co.uk, full of quizzes, activities and resources. And remember, until next time, keep buzzing.